Okay, so ready to explore a world where books are basically outlawed.
Sounds intriguing. Yeah, let's do it.
We're diving deep into Fahrenheit 451, the 1966 film directed by François Truffaut, based on, the Ray Bradbury classic.
Oh, a classic dystopia. I'm in.
Now, here's the twist. We're actually using another podcast's analysis as our main source.
And a deep dive into a deep dive, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It's like getting a unique lens to view this film through.
I like it. I like where this is going.
So picture this a future where knowledge is like super restricted and everyone's hooked on these massive wall TVs.
Oh, I've heard about this. The book-burning fireman, right?
You got it. That's our main man, Guy Montag. He's a fireman, but not the kind we're used to.
Right, yeah, they start fires, don't they? To burn books.
Exactly. Which, of course, sets the stage for the film's whole exploration of censorship and societal control. It's wild.
Yeah, it's like taking the idea of book banning to a whole other level.
Absolutely. And Montag, at the start, is totally all in on this book burning thing.
Yeah, he's like the poster boy for it, right?
Yeah. You could say that. But then he meets Clarisse.
Oh, Clarice, the free spirit.
Yeah, she's the one who kind of opens his eyes to the power of books, to thinking for himself.
A total game changer for him, I bet.
It really is. And I think what's so fascinating is how Truffaut, the director, visually portrays this whole internal shift for Montag.
Yeah, how so? What did you notice?
Well, it's subtle, but the use of color is really deliberate. And then there are these moments of pure silence. Almost no background music, which is unusual for a film.
Huh. I didn't actually notice that about the music now that you mention it. Interesting.
Yeah, and it creates this really eerie, almost suffocating atmosphere.
Oh, I can see that. Like adding to the tension and sense of isolation.
Exactly. You're right on the money.
Yeah.
Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. Julie Christie.
Oh, yeah, she's in this.
Right. Not only is she in it, she plays two roles.
No way. Wait, really? Who does she play?
One, she plays Clarisse, the free thinker. But she also plays Linda.
Linda. Oh, right. Montag's wife.
Yes. Linda, who is basically the embodiment of this society's, mindless consumerism.
Wow. That's some interesting casting right there.
It is. And I don't think it's just symbolic. You actually see it in Christie's performance.
Okay, yeah. Explain that. How do you see it?
Well, with Clarisse, everything's vibrant, full of life, and she's often shown bathed in this warm light. But Linda, she's almost always in these cold, sterile-looking settings. And her face is, well, it's kind of blank.
Wow. Yeah, that's a stark contrast, all right.
Right, and it really highlights the choice that's in front of Montag.
Like, will he stay numb like Linda? Or will he embrace freedom like Clarisse?
Exactly. And that tension, that choice, it's at the heart of what the film is exploring.
Yeah.
Individuality versus just conforming.
It's like a visual representation of the whole theme.
And speaking of conformity, those firemen.
Oh, yeah. There's something else, aren't they?
It's creepy, like they're emotionless robots.
Yeah.
So efficient in their book burning.
Yeah, it's disturbing to watch. Especially that opening scene.
Oh, with the mountain of books, right?
Yeah, like a giant bonfire of knowledge.
Chilling. And I think it's supposed to be. Truffaut's showing us how powerful the system is, crushing any kind of dissent.
Yeah, like no room for questioning anything.
And if you watch closely, the way the firemen move, it's all in unison. Their faces hidden behind those helmets.
Dehumanized, almost.
Right. Like they've just become tools of the system. And then as the film goes on, we start to see Montag's perspective shifting.
He starts to realize what's actually being lost, right?
It becomes personal for him. It's not just an abstract idea of knowledge being destroyed anymore.
He's like waking up from a dream.
Yeah. And you can feel his internal conflict growing, which really reflects the larger conflict in the society. Like ignorance versus enlightenment.
It's that classic struggle, isn't it? But played out so well in this film.
It really is. And that brings us to the core of what the film's saying about society. It's not just about censorship. It's about a whole society choosing comfort and blind obedience over thinking for themselves.
Yikes. Yeah, no one wants to be that society.
Right. But here's the thing. What's so striking to me is how plausible this dystopia feels.
No, I know what you mean.
It's not like some crazy futuristic world with flying cars or anything.
It's almost subtle.
Yeah, like a slow creep towards emptiness. And that makes it even scarier, I think.
It's like a warning sign we should all pay attention to.
Exactly. So in this world where everything is controlled, knowledge, just thinking for yourself, it becomes an act of rebellion.
Even just reading a book. Wild.
Totally wild. The film really highlights how those in power are terrified of people thinking for themselves.
Makes sense, right? It threatens their control.
That's it. So they use censorship, keep everyone in this state of passive acceptance.
It's a scary thought.
It is. Now, before we go too much further, there's something about the director, Truffaut, that I find really fascinating.
Oh, okay. What's that?
Well, did you know he didn't speak much English at the time he made this film?
Wait, seriously?
No. Yeah. I mean, he directed this whole film in English with limited English.
Wow. That's incredible. I wouldn't have guessed.
I know, right? I mean, directing actors, working with the crew, making sure his vision comes through.
Must have been a huge challenge.
It blows my mind.
It really speaks to his talent, for sure. Like, finding a way to communicate despite that barrier.
I read somewhere that he relied a lot on his assistant and Oscar Werner.
Werner? Oh, the actor who plays Montag.
Yeah, to help him, bridge the language gap.
Fascinating. It makes you realize that when someone's truly passionate about a story, they find a way.
They do. And get this, Ray Bradbury, who wrote the book, was actually hesitant about a film adaptation at first.
Oh, really? Why is that?
I think he was worried it wouldn't do the book justice, wouldn't capture the nuances.
Yeah, that's understandable.
But in the end, Truffaut's vision won him over.
He must have done something right. What did Bradbury think of it?
Bradbury actually praised the film later on, said it captured the essence of his concerns about censorship and, social control.
Wow, so Truffaut really nailed it then.
He did. He had this way of understanding these complex themes and then bringing them to life on screen.
Like, he got to the heart of the book.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of getting to the heart of things, did you notice that there are no printed words in the opening credits?
Wait, really? No, I didn't catch that.
I know, it's subtle. It's one of those details you might miss on a first watch. But once you see it, it adds a whole other layer.
Wow, you're right. It's like visually driving home the point that this world is devoid of the written word.
Right. So clever. Truffaut, man, he's a genius.
A genius, indeed. Yeah, it's like one of those things you don't realize until someone points it out.
And then you can't unsee it. It just adds so much depth.
Speaking of depth, you know what really gets me about this film? It's how relevant it still feels today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with information these days.
Right, and it's not always easy to tell what's real, what's spin, what's just trying to keep us passive.
Totally. It's almost like Bradbury and Truffaut could see the future. Like they knew this was where we were headed.
Yeah, they understood something about human nature, I think, and the dangers of just giving up on critical thinking.
The film doesn't just tell us that knowledge is power, it shows us what happens when we lose that power.
It's a powerful warning, for sure. And the way they portray that allure of just being comfortable and not questioning anything, it's brilliant.
Remember that scene with Linda and her friends?
With the wall-sized TVs? Yeah, how could I forget?
They're completely absorbed in these vapid shows, laughing at silly jokes.
And they're totally oblivious to anything else happening around them.
Chilling, right. They're plugged into this system that keeps them distracted.
Keeps them from engaging with anything meaningful or challenging.
Exactly. It's such a stark contrast to Clarice,
Oh, yeah. Clarice is all about curiosity, about wanting more than just empty entertainment.
She's the one who pushes Montag to see things differently, to question.
Yeah.
She's like this little crack in the wall of their manufactured reality.
And through Montag, the film shows us that even in the most oppressive situations, there's still that human drive to fight back, to seek out truth.
It's hopeful, in a way.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me, though, is how the film uses technology.
Oh, how so?
Well, it's set in the future, but there's not a ton of futuristic gadgets,
Yeah.
It's mostly those big TV screens.
I see what you mean. I think that was intentional, though, wasn't it? Part of Truffaut's vision?
Yeah, I think so. Focusing on those simple screens emphasizes the timelessness of the story.
Right. It's not about some specific technology. It's about human tendencies. And those don't really change.
Which is why it still resonates with us today, I think.
Yeah.
Even with all our fancy new tech, we still worry about information overload, about being manipulated.
Absolutely. It's like a wake-up call to be more mindful of the things that shape our perceptions,
To question things, to seek out different perspectives.
Yes. Otherwise, we just end up passively accepting whatever's put in front of us.
The film really underscores that the battle for intellectual freedom is never really over. It's constant.
It is. It takes vigilance, being willing to challenge those in power, and a commitment to protecting knowledge.
Speaking of protecting knowledge,
Yeah.
the book people in the film.
Oh, yes. The ones who memorize entire books.
Yeah. To keep those stories alive,
Yeah.
they basically become living libraries.
Such a powerful image, right? A testament to the power of storytelling. that human need to connect to something bigger than ourselves.
And it's also a reminder that technology can be used in different ways, right?
Oh, absolutely. It can be used to control, but it can also be used to preserve what's really important.
And that message of hope, that even when everything seems lost, human ingenuity can find a way, it's pretty inspiring.
It is. It's a reminder that even small acts of resistance can make a difference. Like, think about those who risked their lives to hide books.
They weren't just saving objects, were they?
No, they were saving ideas. They were fighting for that essential part of what makes us human, the ability to think, to feel, to question.
It's powerful stuff. And it's not just about those big heroic acts either.
Right. It's about the choices we make every day, the information we consume, the conversations we have.
The questions we ask.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that intellectual freedom is an active responsibility, not something we can just take for granted.
It's something we have to constantly work at, protect, both for ourselves and for future generations.
Well said. It's really striking how the film presents reading as something subversive, almost dangerous.
Oh, I know. It's like this complete reversal of how we usually think of it.
In Fahrenheit 451, reading is an act of defiance, a threat to the order of things.
It makes you realize how powerful books and ideas really are, and how much those in power fear them.
That reminds me of something Toni Morrison said.
Yeah.
About how the real function of racism is distraction.
Distraction.
Yeah, it keeps you from doing your work, from focusing on the real issues.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. But you're right, there's a parallel there. Just like racism, censorship, and suppressing knowledge, they distract us.
They keep us from challenging the systems that keep injustice going.
That's why this film feels so urgent, even today. We need to be aware of how information can be used against us, how stories can be twisted to benefit those in power.
It's on each of us to be critical thinkers, to question the sources we rely on, and to look for different viewpoints.
If we don't, we risk becoming part of the problem, right?
Exactly. So let's circle back to Truffaut and his experience directing this film. I'm still amazed that he pulled it off with limited English.
I know. Imagine the challenges, conveying those subtle emotions, directing actors in a language you don't fully grasp.
It must have been like trying to conduct an orchestra without speaking the musician's language. But he managed to create this masterpiece.
And it's not just about the language barrier. Think about the cultural differences, too, the nuances of humor and expression that he had to navigate.
He had to bridge a cultural gap as well as a language gap.
And he did it brilliantly, capturing the essence of Bradbury's American dystopia, while also bringing in his own European sensibility.
It just goes to show good storytelling is universal. It transcends those boundaries.
And that universality is what makes Fahrenheit 451 so powerful. It speaks to our fears, our hopes, our capacity for both destruction and for good.
It really makes you think about the world around you and your place in it.
So as we head into the final part of our deep dive, let's keep that in mind. How does Fahrenheit 451 speak to us now, and what lessons can we take away from it? It's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? A film from way back then, still hitting so hard today.
It is. It's like Bradbury and Truffaut were sending a warning through time. About, becoming complacent and falling for easy answers.
And that message, it's been around forever, hasn't it? This whole fight for intellectual freedom, pushing back against censorship.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The battle to control information, it's an age-old struggle.
And it's still happening, just in different forms all around us. Look at the rise of misinformation, the algorithms that, decide what we see online.
Right. And don't forget attempts to silence people who disagree. It's like... We're kind of living in a Fahrenheit 451 world already.
It's a scary thought. But it's also a reminder that we can't just sit back and assume our freedoms are safe. We got to be active, shape the world we want to live in.
Couldn't agree more. And that starts with being informed, with getting involved, and with being willing to challenge things.
What really struck me was how the film shows knowledge as something precious, something worth fighting for, even dying for. Those book people, man.
I know, right? Risking it all to keep those stories and ideas alive. It's like a testament to the human spirit, that need we have to connect with something bigger than ourselves, even when things are tough.
And it reminds us that knowledge isn't just about, facts and figures. It's about our humanity, our history, our hopes.
Absolutely. And it's about making sure we pass all that down to the next generation. Keep that flame of curiosity going.
Keep those minds thinking.
And that's where education comes in, right? It's more than memorizing stuff. It's about learning how to think critically, about encouraging kids to ask questions.
To be curious.
Yeah. Give them the tools to question things, to explore, to make informed choices about the world.
The film really shows us that education isn't some extra thing. It's essential, like the foundation of a free society, especially when knowledge itself is under attack.
Totally. Thinking back on all the details we've talked about, Truffaut's use of visuals was just masterful.
Oh, absolutely. Even the things that weren't there, like those missing words in the credits, added to the impact.
It's like he used every single frame to tell the story, to pull us into that world where books are feared.
And to think he did all that while barely speaking English.
It's incredible. He really understood what Bradbury was going for, and he found a way to bring it to life for everyone to see.
It just shows you the best stories can speak to anyone, regardless of language or where you're from.
Exactly. And that shared humanity is what gives me hope, Even in the darkest times, we find ways to protect what's important, to connect with each other, to stand up to oppression.
And that message, it's just as important now as it was back then.
It really is. We all need to hear it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Fahrenheit 451, I'm feeling, well, a little uneasy, honestly.
Uneasy.
About what?
Thinking about how easily we could lose our freedoms. But also I'm kind of inspired.
Inspired by?
By how resilient people can be,
Yeah.
And how important knowledge and critical thinking really are.
It all comes down to choices, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We can choose to just go along with things, or we can choose to be active, engaged, and question what we're told.
We can build walls, or we can build bridges. It's our call.
So true.
Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. This was a great discussion.
To all our listeners out there, stay curious, keep those hearts open, and use those voices. The fight for intellectual freedom, it's far from over, and it's definitely worth fighting for.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the light of knowledge burning bright.